first recorded sighting that I was aware of was back in like the 1936 in Paris, Michigan. There was an alleged dog man who came up on a man's property, and it was just, I thought it was an oversized wolf. Then all of a sudden got up on two legs, turned around and ran back into the forest. Of course, we've all heard about Steve Cook. He came up with his jingle about the Dogman that he broadcast on his radio platform. People caught a lot of attention, thought it was kind of funny. Of course, we all know about Linda Godfrey out in Wisconsin, about the Beast of Britt Road. And then in Wexford, Michigan, not too long after that, because Wexford here in the state of Michigan is actually known as the Dogman capital of the world. That's what they say, that's their claim to fame. And not too long after that, there was an alleged report of these Dogman upright standing creatures roaming the valley of Wexford.
11 lumberjacks near the Garland Swamp found an animal they thought was a dog. In a playful mood, they chased it around till it ran inside a hollow log. A logger named Johnson grabbed him a stick and poked around inside. Then the thing let out an unearthly scream and came out and stood upright.
There was another outbreak that had been really not so widely reported up in Traverse City, Michigan. And the man who put it together, a DJ, was thinking he was just going to have some kind of a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. And so, being a musician, he put together sort of a ballad that was based on a few very old logging tales, an actual up-to-date modern time police report of somebody who was reporting one of these things, and then some things that he just made up.
You have to sort of understand the background of the song. It was written originally as just an April Fool's prank for the radio station where I worked. And the morning guy and I became kind of legendary for some of the pranks we would play on April Fool's. But he came to me really late in the year '87. It was the last week of March, and he said, "We got to do something. We haven't even thought about it, talked about it." So I sat down with a little toy $99 Casio keyboard, laid out a rhythm, laid out a little bit of a melody, and the thing just kind of fell together in about 20 minutes. In terms of the sightings, though, I've always sort of been a crypto creature fan. So when we talk about the verses in the song, every one of those verses illustrates a sighting that did take place. They're all based on actual accounts. But for example, the lumberjack sighting, that was totally fabricated, totally created by me. And because the year that the song was written was 1987, I wanted to create sort of a cyclical nature to the appearances of the Dogman. So every verse happens in a year ending in 7, and it goes back for 100 years. And so the first sighting was one that was just completely fabricated, but the rest of them were all based on actual sightings.
And somewhere in the Northwoods darkness, a creature walks upright. And the best advice you may ever get is don't go out at night.
Everything seems to go back to when the disc jockey released the song, The Dogman. And it was a very popular song around Halloween time. But according to legends, this goes back to the early logging camps. When men would go into the forest, they would cut down the logs, and one of the original stories was that there was a group of dogs that ran into the loggers' camp, and the camp was, had all these dogs running around, and the men were throwing rocks at these dogs. And they kind of isolated one and were throwing more rocks at that one. And then the dog stood up on its back legs and proceeded to retaliate. And that is said to be where, according to the early loggers, the Dogman legend started. And then we've got reports of hunters being out in a boat or fishermen out in a boat, and what they thought was a hunting dog swam up to the boat, and they started trying to pull the hunting dog in because, hey, a loose hunting dog can be a valuable asset. But then They were kind of shocked when the dog took the initiative and put one arm over each side of the boat and was trying to pull itself in. And these were not dog paws, these were clawed hands. And so they promptly escaped from there. We do have Native American legends that suggest that there is a dogman type creature here in the Great Lakes area. But most people became aware of the dogman legend when that song was released, and the footage that they said that they captured, first they said, oh, it's real, and then they said it was faked, and then they went back and said it was real. And I've seen the footage, and you're like, oh, that's too good to be true. And unfortunately it was. But since then, people have come forward, and what they initially thought were Bigfoot reports, now they start remembering details. Like, well, our Bigfoot had a snout, it had ears, it had a tail. That's no longer a Bigfoot, that's a dogman.
Actually, I was just trying to come up with a unique creature for Michigan, for northern Michigan specifically, because we have so many deep forests here, and people see things all the time that they really don't know exactly what they were. I kind of wanted to create a creature that was an amalgam of all of the crypto creatures out there between Bigfoot and Chupacabra, and the one thing I didn't want to do is try to duplicate something that already existed. The werewolf is one that always sort of got to me personally as being a really frightening creature. But a werewolf is something that transitions from human being to a wolf. A dogman is an actual species. He is kind of caught in the middle and he doesn't change. I also think that the song gave people a picture in their mind of, oh, that thing that I saw that I didn't know what it was, maybe that's what it was. And their memory maybe sort of morphs into having seen a dogman. And I had no idea when I created it that I was recreating something that had existed for thousands of years.
I think it was just because of the song and the beat, just to be honest with you. Everyone thought it was funny. Just like, with a Bigfoot, beef jerky, jackling. So that was I think really the person that really made it more popular was Linda.
When Linda Godfrey started publishing the books that primarily focused on the Beast of Bray Road in Wisconsin, suddenly people were coming forward and saying, we've got that creature here in Michigan too. And Linda did come to Michigan on quite a few different occasions to investigate the Dogman reports.
The descriptions people gave of the Michigan Dogman were no different than the descriptions people gave of the Beast of Bray Road. And in some southern states, they would call it the loup-garou, which is French for werewolf, or the rougarou, which is the Cajun variation. So every place had their sightings and their local names, not realizing this was a very widespread phenomenon.
The song played twice on the air that morning, and I said, when you play it, don't say anything. Just play it and sandwich it between two country songs. And nothing happened during the morning show until he got off the air, and as he was going back to his office, the front desk phone rang, and a man named Robert Fortney called, and he said that in 1937, he had been fishing along the banks of the Muskegon River, and he was approached by a pack of dogs. And one of them stood up on his hind legs and stared at him. He said he had a .22 rifle with him at the time because he'd been rabbit hunting earlier in the day. And he shot a shot into the air. The other dogs ran off, but that one that stood up stayed for quite some time. And the words that really got to me that he said was he was swearing that dog was smiling at him. And when he called us, he said it was the first time he had told that story in 50 years. He had never told his kids, never told his wife, because he thought he had had some sort of a hallucination. But when he heard the song, it just brought that back to reality, and he had to call. And that sort of started a cascade of people calling and saying, that crazy song you played this morning, that's a real thing, that's no joke. And from that point forward, the calls just kept coming from people saying, my uncle saw this, or we had our hunting cabin was trashed at one time and we could never explain what did it. But then the real light went on when I heard from one of the elders of one of the Native American tribes, and he said, this is a creature that is described in their stories going back generations.
In the very beginning, they almost uniformly said something that was 5 to 7 feet tall on its hind legs, looked like a German shepherd or a wolf with the tall ears, the long muzzle, walking on its toe pads like dogs do, and a tail, and that immediately, to my mind, ruled out Bigfoot because it's just obviously a canine species. Over time, I've noted there have been variations. I don't think that everything everyone sees all the time is the same phenomenon. For instance, there's another subtype that seems to pop into people's houses that are upright canines, but they don't look like the normal wolfish, German shepherdish type of thing. They're very tall. People describe them as reminding them of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead of the Egyptians. The body is much more like a human than like an upright canine, even though the head is completely canine. They're normally very dark or black fur, shorter fur, not shaggy like the other ones.
The song played, as you know, on April 1st, and like any novelty song, for a couple of months it had been the most requested song on the radio, and then it just sort of faded away. And by the middle of June, things had started to calm down, and we'd kind of forgotten about it. And then in July, right around the middle of July, we got a call from the Department of Natural Resources, an officer in the Lake County area. He had been called to a hunting cabin in the Luther area, and that hunting cabin had been mauled on the outside. A screen door had been torn off it. It had claw marks and teeth marks all the way around the door casing, all the way around a window casing. And the deputy sheriff who showed up out there brought a tape measure, and there were scratch marks that were over 7 feet tall. And the only tracks they could find in the dirt outside the cabin were dog tracks. And the DNR officer described those as the size of a pie plate. He'd never seen dog tracks that big. And we put that story on the air as part of our newscast, and the newspaper picked it up, and then they sent it to the Associated Press. They sent it all over the United States. From that point, it just catapulted into this phenomenon. We started getting requests from all over the world. How can I get a copy of this song?
In the late 1980s and early 90s, strange reports began surfacing all across Michigan. People were seeing a creature, tall, covered in hair, walking on 2 legs with the head of a dog or a wolf. A lot of those reports came from the area around Manistee National Forest, and over time, that stretch of woods would become known as Dogman country. People reported something following them through the trees, pacing their cars at night, or heard it howling deep in the forest. Whatever it wasn't going away, and it was no longer just a story. But those sightings didn't start in the 1980s. They go back decades. Long before Cook's song gave it a name, people were seeing the same creature in the same places. Old stories from the Manistee area describe something that fits the Dogman description, something that shouldn't be there. And once people heard the song, they started talking. The reports came in quickly, and what they described wasn't new. It had been there all along, just waiting for someone to notice.
This was 1964, and it was a foggy night, and then their German Shepherd started barking. Next thing they know, the German Shepherd came crashing through the window with a chain wrapped around his neck and was dead on the floor.
An officer had been called to a hunting cabin that had been mauled on the outside. It had claw marks and teeth marks that were over 7 feet tall, and the only tracks they could find were dog tracks, the size of a pie plate.
The woods got very, very quiet. The woods do not get quiet like this unless there's a predator in the area.
As I looked over to my right, there was this werewolf in my window. It's just not an animal. It looks like a wolf, but it had this intelligence in its eyes.
get that feeling inside. You just know that you just become prey.